Minister's visit to Washington last September and the President's visit here in January. We came out of both of those visits with some 80 different work streams just from the President's January visit.
A lot of action items?
A lot of action items from the Prime Minister's visit to Washington, 30 different working groups. We've had an incredible stream of high-level visitors from Washington.
Yeah.
There is just a lot of interest. So, you know, a long answer to your question, it's been incredibly gratifying.
Mm-hmm.
Because we have such a terrific partnership. I really feel like we're at a different level as well in this relationship.
What's a typical day like? I mean, let's say once when you're in Delhi, let's say in the office,
Yeah.
and then when you're out on the road, kind of connecting with folks across India.
Right. Gosh, every day is so different, and there really
begins with Twitter, I hope. Begins with Twitter.
It should, right?
Okay, done.
No, I look, social media has become a big part of communicating in this job, but there's a management portion to this job. We have a big embassy. There is a outreach component, a lot of speeches. There is a complicated foreign policy component to this job, which involves a lot of interaction with our Ministry of External Affairs counterparts. You know, we're trying to do new things as well. So there's a lot of discussions about how we can reach more people, what new initiatives can we do, what do the people in both our countries want, where do they want us to take the relationship, and we spend a lot of time thinking about those things.
Cool. One of the things you hear a lot when you think about Indian-American relations, you hear world's oldest democracy and world's largest democracy,
Right.
which is a pretty powerful statement. Underneath that, you know, what do you think it is sort of endemically, foundationally that binds our two peoples together, above and beyond these sort of aggregate sound bites?
Right. It is. It's our values and our really deep people-to-people connections. Our constitutions are very similar. We are people who respect the rule of law. We celebrate innovation. We celebrate diversity. We you know, really have these ideals that bind us together. And so it's only natural that our people have come together over many decades. President said it when he was here, that it's just natural that we are best partners, and it makes a lot of sense. And you know, look, and I understand this from a personal perspective.
Yeah.
When my father emigrated in 1963.
From where?
From Jalandhar in Punjab. And I had a chance to go back up there a couple months ago.
Wow.
And it was an amazing experience because I went to the two-room house where my grandmother lived.
Still have family?
Yeah. A lot of family all over. And but I went to that two-room house where I lived in the summer of 1974. No indoor plumbing, no stove, no refrigerator. And it just gave me a good appreciation for where we come from. And I always tell people that you don't know where you want to go until you know where you're from.
Yeah.
And we know where we're from, and it really, that experience, our family experience, has been replicated millions of times over. And now we've got, you know, over 3 million Indian Americans in the United States.
US alone.
In the United States alone. And I think that has a way of pulling our two nations together.
Why don't we talk about that actually? This the NRI community, and there's been a lot of, it's quite topical. There's been a lot of talk of late with Sundar Pichai being named CEO of Google, and a lot of narrative around the success of Indians outside of India. How do you think about your role, the embassy's role in connecting with that community? How do you think about that?
No, it's really an important question. That community wants to give back increasingly in some way, so we see that community increasingly looking for ways to come back to India and have some kind of social and public impact. That community is making huge contributions in the United States, in business, in Silicon Valley, in medicine and technology, in government. And what I say to Indian American and South Asian groups when I speak to them in the U.S. is that we also shouldn't forget that not everyone has made it, and that there are still people on the margins, and we have to look out for them too and stand up for them and be their voice as well. So I think that's part of the responsibility of leadership is making sure that we don't leave people behind.
Cool. Now, coming to kind of diplomacy and Indian-U.S. relations, I mean, what is top of mind? What are a few things that are top of mind for you as you conclude your first year as ambassador?
Yeah, and again, one of the great things about having 2 heads of state summits in a 4-month period is that we did not have to go looking around for what we should focus on.
Sure.
So when you look at what the President and Prime Minister agreed to and shook hands on, it was continuing to make our strategic and defense and security cooperation a big pillar of what we do. So we spend a lot of time on defense cooperation, intelligence sharing, homeland security issues, and that's really a core issue. We spend a lot of time on increasing our business connections and two-way trade. And the President set a really ambitious goal of going from $100 billion in two-way trade to $500 billion, and we really believe we can get there.
By the end of his...
Well, we didn't put a year on it, but we think we can get there in a relatively reasonable amount of time, because right now we're not trading enough, and given the size of our economies, we can do a lot more. And the reason this is so important is that it'll create jobs in both of our countries and help lift people up from the base of the economic pyramid into the middle. We focus on clean energy and environment, which I think is a really big and important issue for the future of both of our countries. And then there are a whole range of other issues: health, science, space, transportation, agriculture, development. The U.S. and India are now working in 10 other countries on child and maternal health and development issues. And that begins, I think, to reach what I think the Prime Minister said. He said, it's too limiting to look at what the two of us can just do for each other.
Interesting.
We need to start thinking about the impact that we can have on global prosperity and global peace. So we have started to describe our relationship as if we had a strategic partnership before, we called strategic plus. With the plus indicating we're working in more areas and we're working in more areas of the world together. We outlined a joint strategic vision for the Asia Pacific for the first time ever. So we're now mapping out all kinds of cooperation between our two navies and in maritime areas in ways that we never thought was possible. We're now talking about space cooperation, deep sea exploration, so there's a lot happening.
So that's a lot. So with the strategic dialogue coming up, does this roughly reflect the contours of what you're hoping to drive there, or is that dialogue going to be a bit more
absolutely. And what's different about this dialogue that we've never done before is that this is our first ever strategic and commercial dialogue.
For our viewers, what is a strategic dialogue? What does that actually mean?
It means, in the past, it meant the Secretary of State with the Minister of External Affairs would sit down for 2 days, either in Washington or New Delhi, and run through all of our strategic priorities between our two countries and report out on where we were on all kinds of issues, from defense to economics, to trade, but it was really focused on the foreign policy, defense issues. We're now increasing it to include all of our commercial, trade, and economic issues, because we do feel like they're so interlinked and so important. What happens is it brings our whole of government approach to working with India, and the Indians are doing the same thing with us. So it's a big deal, it's important, and we're really looking forward to it.
So let's talk tech a little bit, and I think the word technology is sort of overused. Let's talk about the internet specifically and the role you think the internet has played in diplomacy in your 8 months specifically, tools like Twitter, et cetera. And where do you think our potential has not yet been realized? What I don't want is kind of it's easy for us to sort of get complacent and say the rise of diplomacy is over and we're there, we've arrived. But where do you think, what role do you think in Indian-U.S. relations, and where is there still potential?
Right. Look, I think we're just actually scratching the surface on how to connect diplomacy with all the social media tools, because ultimately what diplomacy is connecting with people. It's bringing our two nations together. It's explaining why this relationship matters. And there's the old way of doing it, which is high-level meeting, press statement, and that's certainly still one way to do it. But people with 900 million people with mobile devices, the number of internet users, not only in India but around the world, we have to be out there And it's a competition. It is a competition for ideas as well. So we have to be out there with innovative ideas, new thoughts, and making the case that this relationship matters and explaining to people. Now, where we can go, we should look at how to use these tools to have a greater social impact. Maybe there's ways that we can do a better job to connect with people, outside of cities and more rural areas. So we're looking at all of that.
Well, we do have Twitter open here, so do send your questions in via Periscope. We will take your Periscope questions and on Twitter. I guess I'll just get it started with, what is your impression of the use of Twitter in India? Beginning with the government of India, and then just with folks you've been meeting. Any observations? Because it varies country by country, right?
Yeah. Well, I think you know the answer to this question, which is it's so widely used, and from press statements from the Prime Minister to members of Parliament to, frankly, our government, it is an incredibly important way to communicate, to get information out quickly, and so we've really come to rely on it. And but we've come to rely on multiple social media platforms as well. But it's a big part of what we track each day.
Let's take a question this is from Saurabh at SaurabD04. What do you think of Indo-US relations in the context of education and Indians seeking to go to the United States to study? Is that something that you think about? Do you think we've realized where we ought to be from a public policy standpoint on that?
Right.
Thanks, Saurabh.
It's a really good question, and I'm really pleased that just in a 10-year period, we've seen about a 50 to 60% increase in the number of Indian students studying in the United States. I think we're at 103,000 Indian students now studying in the U.S. It's the second highest from any country in the world, and that number is only increasing. Hardly a day goes by when a student does not come by the embassy for some reason, either seeking information about U.S. colleges or coming in to get their student visa.
Yeah.
So it's a great thing. I'd love to see more American students coming to India, and we're seeing those numbers increase. We also have to look at how to increase higher education collaboration. I hear this from my dad a lot, who's a college professor, retired college professor, who says we can do much more in terms of our educational partnerships. That's at the higher ed level. But then we should really also look, we've had a really interesting community college initiative and skilling initiative for those people who maybe don't want to go on to a 4-year degree or a graduate degree, but need a skill to survive in a 21st century economy.
Right.
And whether that's additive manufacturing, advanced metalworking, digital skills, we should look, given the incredible capabilities between our two populations, we should be able to do a lot to give people those skills to compete in this modern economy.
I am seeing a bunch of questions on visas, and one of the things that I thought was interesting that you mentioned, your role as a general manager, right? You're actually a lot of people forget that an ambassador is running an operation, right? So you want to talk a little bit about the operational element of your role, because the embassy, of course, provides services in addition to kind of thinking big picture about policy, right?
Yeah, no, we have, and it's a big operation. I'm really proud of the team that we have. We continue to attract the best talent from the United States, and we do provide a service function to American citizens who are in India, but also to Indian nationals who want to go to the United States. And then there's a whole range of issues in between. I'm happy to report that this year we will have the highest number of Indians visiting the United States than in our history. So it'll be somewhere around 1.1 or 1.2 million. That's up over 30% just from last year, and we see no drop in the interest in visiting the United States, either for tourist visas or for immigrant visas. I'm also happy to report that Indians continue to get the lion's share, 65% of H-1B visas, and
really?
Yeah, and the most of L-1 visas, the intra-company transfers. So I know this is it's always a tough issue, and we are working really hard to make sure that that the waiting times are down, but the trends again are all moving in the right direction, and we are thrilled, frankly, that more people want to go and visit the U.S.
That question, by the way, is from Vatsal Sheth. Thanks, Vatsal. We have a question here about the Prime Minister's Make in India initiative. Is there a role for the U.S. government and your organization at state? Are you participating in some way in Make in India? This question comes from Siddharth.
Again, a really good question, and our government can play a really important facilitating role. Ultimately, I think it's our companies and our private sector that have come in and shown a lot of interest in Make in India. I'll just give the defense industry as one example where we have seen dozens and dozens of U.S. companies, both big defense companies and medium-sized companies, want to come in and partner with Indian firms in the defense space. And so short answer, yeah, we have been a partner, whether it's in infrastructure development or in clean energy or in defense. We realize that there is a need to partner and help support that Make in India initiative. I'm also happy to report, though, that there's an increase in the number of Indian companies going to the United States. And that's good for India, that's good for the U.S. Just in the last 10 years ago, there were only about 80 or 85 Indian companies in the U.S. There are now well over 200. And
in the last year?
Well, now, as we measure it 10 years later, there are now over 200. And I suspect the number is higher than that, but that's what we're able to measure. And again, that helps create a flow of information, of travel, of workers, of collaboration in a way that we didn't see before.
Keep the questions coming. I got to figure out a way to read the Periscope questions or have. We got a room here, by the way, behind the phone. There are a bunch of people standing, and they're not giving me questions from Periscope. But we'll address that later.
A lot of questions about student visas.
A
lot of questions about visas, about possibilities of visa on arrival. A lot of visa-specific questions.
And look, we're again on
Can't make this stuff up.
No, on the consular issues, they're really important, and I think we want to make it. We want to make that process user-friendly for people, and I really believe, we have a very, very professional team that is working on this around the clock and trying to meet the huge demand that there is.
Why don't we?
There was one question, I forget from whom, saying that apart from education, and what are the other industries or areas that U.S.-India collaboration is an important aspect. I think you already talked about Make in India, so manufacturing. Right. Is anything apart from those two?
Sure. We're trying to line up where and support those areas where India is trying to go. So in other words, moving to the green economy. We think we can be a very important partner in the goal of achieving 175 gigawatts of solar, wind, and biomass electricity generation. So we have established a lot of partnerships in that area. In high tech, the partnerships have been around for many, many years, and those are only growing. In defense, in smart cities and infrastructure and city planning, India is going through a period of urbanization that almost no country has experienced before. And so this initiative of planning smart cities, we have sponsored and co-partnered with 3 cities in particular, and so that's been important. From sanitation to roads to airports. Clean India, we've been very engaged in Digital India. So we're lined up and supportive of these key initiatives.
Here's a question from a user. This gives you the sense of the breadth of Twitter. You don't need your name on Twitter. This comes from @sane_voices. Okay. Asking a question about the role of India in international institutions, from the United Nations, the IMF, the World Bank, etc. What is your take on the role of India's seat at the table there? And
I think it's critically important. And this past week, I, on behalf of the president, reaffirmed our strong position that India be given a seat on a reformed UN Security Council. And I just want to make sure that position is clear.
And you see the hearts coming on the Periscope.
And the president has called for a stronger and more influential role by the emerging economies, including India, in the G20, for example. Now, why is that important? Because we see this move and strongly support this move of India going from what the Foreign Secretary calls balancing power to leading power. And to be a leading power in the world, there's no question you have to have a seat in international institutions, and we strongly support that. And so, yes, I mean, I think it's critical. And we just have seen, look, in the past year, what India has done regionally to support the disaster response in Nepal after the earthquake, the crisis in Yemen. We asked India for help in evacuating U.S. citizens from Yemen. And that's the model of the future. India as net security provider, India as a force for stability and security in this part of the world. And we want India to succeed and be that rising power. I just gave a talk last Friday about all the work that we can do together in what we call the shared spaces, in the maritime domain, in the space,
sort of truly international,
in the air,
where you need,
on the internet, in these shared spaces that are sometimes at risk. The U.S. and India coming together can help provide stability and help defend the world order that we have come to rely on, that peaceful, democratic world order.
Got some fun questions. This is from Venki in Chennai. I think you visited Chennai.
I did, yeah.
Did you like the coffee? Did you like the city? It's the question.
Amazing city, amazing filter coffee.
Okay. Perfect answer.
Yeah, no, I don't know that I could make the filter coffee the way they did, but it was what a great visit.
Other memorable cities or cuisines. You know the name of the room you're sitting in, right?
I do, the butter chicken room.
This is the butter chicken room on Twitter. So
yeah. The trip back to Punjab was obviously memorable. The trip to Kerala and going out to our aircraft carrier, the USS Carl Vinson, with 10 Indian naval aviators.
Where's the USS Carl Vinson?
So it was coming from the Persian Gulf, where it was conducting anti-ISIL campaigns. We were able to fly out and land on the deck of the carrier with like I said, a number of members from the Indian Navy and Indian naval aviators to talk about carrier cooperation. That was very memorable. You know, we've done so many trips, it's hard to pick out a few, but from the technology cooperation of southern India to the business collaboration in Mumbai to one of our oldest consulates in the world in Calcutta and the regional connectivity. What I've really enjoyed is going to meet the students at the high schools, the trade schools, and speaking at the different colleges, and just meeting people. But again, perhaps walking down that long alleyway in Jalandhar where my grandmother lived, and going into that 2-room house, going to DAV College where my dad graduated from, and giving the commencement address. Those are experiences that are hard to beat.
Cool. Time check, sorry.
There was actually one question on Periscope from a user, Jesse Janda. You talked about Punjab earlier, just saying that how do you think Punjab as a state is doing compared to the rest of the states in the country?
You know, I don't have data in front of me to compare the states, but the one interesting and important thing about going to the states is that you see this, what we have called a race to the top. And you see this incredible competition to attract investment, to attract students, to attract innovators, and trying to bring down regulatory burden, trying to make land conveyance easier, trying to make sure that people understand there's transparency in the decisions that are made, that the legal systems will work for them. And so, and we saw this in a number of deals that U.S. companies are making directly with the states. And that's a really good and positive development. And so, you know, we see that across the country now, and got a really good feeling, not only from Punjab, but in all the states we've gone to. Each of them has something really special to offer.
We've got about 4 minutes to go, so I'll ask one more serious question, and we'll try
There's one fun question.
Okay, and then we'll do a fun question. So, Why don't I start with, so there have been a few questions about the nuclear deal
Yeah.
specifically. When I lived in India last time, it was a big topic,
Yeah.
7, 8 years ago. Where are we on that?
Yeah.
And do you want to address that
Sure.
specifically?
So we just crossed over the 10-year anniversary of the signing of the nuclear deal, which in a way helped transform our relationship, brought our two governments together, brought our people together, and I went through some of the statistics, but what we've seen happen since the signing of the deal in all the other areas, economics and defense and trade, has really been important. On the nuclear deal itself, now we're looking to take that understanding that we reached during the President's visit in January on liability and getting to the next level, which is making sure there are now commercial contracts with our companies, with the government of India to actually build reactors in India, which again will be an important part of the electricity mix. We're getting there. Building a reactor in India is not a fast process, but we're on a good trajectory.
Great. All right, we're going to do one fun question and then try to wrap up here.
Yeah, so the question, there were actually 2-3 people asking that what would be the tourist spots you would recommend to American tourists coming to India to visit, like unusual ones, apart from the Taj Mahal and Kashmir. Like, what are the new
It is
ones?
6 a.m. in New York, so you never know who's listening.
That's true. That's true. So, I mean, obviously, I've been really privileged to go from the beaches of Kerala to the kind of old historic sites in Rajasthan, the great sites right here in New Delhi. I mean, it would be hard to pick one in the city of Calcutta. How beautiful it is. Again, from Chennai to Mumbai. I'm going to mention everybody.
We got time, man.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's this is a place that is again so different and so magnificent in so many ways. So it's hard to pick. It's hard to pick just one. But I think what the great part about visiting here is to meet the people, and I think that's what people need to do is take the time to actually meet the people that are here.
Well, we as a Twitter team really appreciate you being here. I think we set some new standards. We are actually periscoping the Periscope. So I'm not sure, I'll let you check on that, whether another ambassador has done that before. That's interesting. I want to thank you and your team for taking the time for coming here. I want to thank Raheel Khurshid. I want to say hi, Raheel, to the broadcast for setting this up.
He's there.
And of course, want to give you can't leave Twitter, you can't leave Butter Chicken without a bag of goodies.
Oh, great.
Which includes a cricket ball and some other fun things.
Okay,
so
terrific.
Show it to
Yeah,
Periscope. And you're welcome to keep the phone, by the way. You're welcome to keep the Periscope on.
Selfie stick?
Yeah, just keep it on all day. How many of you want it on all day? Just Johnson.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you again.
Well, listen, thank you so much for having us here. You've really helped us transform the way that we actually operate and think and communicate, and really pushed us to think about how to communicate differently. We'll try to keep it interesting and creative, and look forward to this partnership moving forward. So
Great.
thanks a lot. Yeah.
Thanks for coming by.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you. All right.
Chocolate
Bye, guys.
for everyone.
Thanks, guys. Wonderful. See ya. Bye. All right. We're on. That might be on. Great.